What if nearly everything you've been told about insulin resistance is incomplete? For years, the standard narrative has gone something like this. You eat too many carbs, you don't exercise enough, and eventually your doctor hands you a metformin prescription, tells you to clean up your diet, and sends you home. Millions of people have followed that advice faithfully, and for a surprising number of them, the needle barely moved. But what if insulin resistance runs deeper than diet alone? What if the real issue is happening at a cellular level that most standard advice doesn't even address? Because in recent years, a growing body of research has uncovered something remarkable about a plant compound that's been used in traditional medicine for thousands of years, and the findings challenge some deep assumptions about how we treat metabolic dysfunction. Now, I want to be upfront. What I'm sharing today is based on published scientific research, but this is educational content, not medical advice. Always work with your healthcare provider before making changes to your health routine, especially if you're on medication. My name is Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician with nearly a decade of clinical experience. I see hundreds of patients, and metabolic health issues are among the most common things that walk through my doors. So let's talk about what's actually going on inside your body. Before I dive in, if you're new here, consider subscribing. We put out new content several times a week covering metabolic science, longevity research, and practical health strategies. And if you want to connect further, I have a community over on Instagram where I answer your health questions directly. Drop your age and any health concerns in the comments below. I read through them and do my best to respond. Here's what we're covering today. First, the deeper biological mechanism behind insulin resistance that goes beyond eat less sugar. Second, a specific plant compound that clinical trials have compared head-to-head with metformin, with striking results. Third, the role of cellular repair pathways, including a pathway involving your body's own regenerative cells, that could be a missing piece in reversing metabolic dysfunction. And fourth, the critical detail about how this compound is absorbed that determines whether it actually works or does nothing at all. Let's start with what's actually breaking down. Your pancreas contains specialized cells called beta cells. Their entire purpose is to detect rising blood sugar and release insulin to bring things back into balance. When you're metabolically healthy, this system works seamlessly, making thousands of tiny corrections every single day without you even noticing. But here's a sobering reality. Research published in major diabetes journals, including autopsy studies, has shown that by the time someone is formally diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they may have already lost up to 60% of their functional beta cell mass compared to healthy individuals. That's not a small decline. That's a majority of the cells responsible for regulating your blood sugar already gone before you even get the diagnosis. Now, your body does have repair mechanisms. Inside the pancreas, there are progenitor cells, a type of precursor cell that can potentially generate new beta cells. This is established biology. The problem is that the same inflammatory environment driving beta cell destruction appears to also impair these repair pathways. The key culprits are inflammatory signaling molecules, particularly TNF-alpha and IL-6. These are produced in large quantities by visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that wraps around your organs. These inflammatory signals do double damage. They accelerate the destruction of existing beta cells while simultaneously interfering with the regenerative process that's supposed to replace them. So you end up in a vicious cycle. Damage speeds up, repair slows down, and the conventional advice to just eat better and exercise more doesn't directly address this inflammatory cascade. Here's something else that should concern you. A large body of epidemiological research, including meta-analyses pooling data from over 1 million adults, has found that insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia are associated with significantly elevated risks for all-cause mortality and several types of cancer. Elevated insulin acts as a growth factor, and cancer cells, which already proliferate faster than normal cells, appear to thrive in a high insulin environment. Researchers now describe this as the insulin-cancer connection. And here's a frustrating gap in standard medical practice. Most routine checkups test fasting blood glucose, But fasting blood glucose can remain in the normal range for years, while fasting insulin is already significantly elevated. By the time blood sugar finally rises, the underlying metabolic dysfunction may be years old. This is why many researchers and clinicians now advocate for including fasting insulin in routine metabolic screening. So the question shifts. It's not just, how do I eat less sugar? It's, how do I reduce the chronic inflammation, support my body's cellular repair mechanisms, and restore insulin sensitivity at the cellular level? This is where berberine enters the picture. And if you've heard the name before and dismissed it, I'd ask you to stay with me, because the research tells a far more compelling story than most people realize. Berberine is an alkaloid compound found in several plants, including Berberis aristata, golden seal, and Oregon grape. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic practice for over 3,000 years. But modern molecular biology has begun to reveal precisely why it appears to be so effective for metabolic health. One of berberine's primary mechanisms is the activation of an enzyme called AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. Think of AMPK as a master metabolic regulator. When it's activated, your cells shift from storage mode into repair and energy burning mode. It improves insulin sensitivity at the receptor level. It helps clear glucose from the bloodstream without requiring additional insulin. It stimulates autophagy, the cellular cleanup process that recycles damaged components. And emerging research suggests it may support the activity of pancreatic progenitor cells involved in beta cell maintenance. Here's something most people don't realize. Metformin, the most widely prescribed drug for type 2 diabetes in the world, works primarily through the same mechanism, AMPK activation. That's the core reason doctors prescribe it. In 2008, researcher Dr. Jiao Yin and colleagues published a landmark study in the journal Metabolism. In one part of that study, 36 adults with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes were randomized to receive either berberine or metformin at 500 milligrams 3 times daily for 3 months. The results were remarkable. Berberine matched metformin on virtually every major marker. Fasting blood glucose dropped significantly, HbA1c improved substantially, and fasting insulin decreased. But berberine went further. Triglycerides dropped by approximately 35% in the berberine group, while metformin did not significantly move that number. The researchers concluded that berberine showed, and I'm quoting, comparable hypoglycemic efficacy to metformin. Let me put that in perspective. A plant compound, available without a prescription, demonstrated equivalent blood sugar lowering effects to the most prescribed diabetes drug on the planet, while also significantly improving lipid markers that metformin didn't touch, and without the gastrointestinal side effects or the long-term vitamin B12 depletion that metformin can cause in a meaningful percentage of patients. Now, I want to be very clear. I am not telling you to replace your prescribed medication. Metformin is a well-studied, effective drug, and any changes to your medication should be made in consultation with your doctor. What I am saying is that the research on berberine is robust enough to deserve serious attention. Beyond AMPK activation, berberine appears to work through several other important pathways. Research has explored its effects on the NLRP3 inflammasome, a major driver of chronic low-grade inflammation. A study in the Journal of Inflammation Research found that berberine directly inhibited NLRP3 inflammasome activation. This is significant because the NLRP3 inflammasome is increasingly recognized as a key upstream driver of the chronic inflammation that damages beta cells, impairs pancreatic progenitor cell function, and promotes visceral fat accumulation. There's also fascinating research on berberine's effect on the gut microbiome. Studies have shown that berberine significantly increases populations of Akkermansia mucinifera, a beneficial gut bacterium strongly associated with improved insulin sensitivity, lower visceral fat, and reduced inflammatory markers. People with insulin resistance tend to have very low Akkermansia levels, and berberine appears to help rebuild that microbial foundation. Now, let's talk about the cancer prevention data, because this is where the story becomes even more compelling. In 2020, the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology published results from a major randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Over 1,000 patients who had previously had precancerous colorectal polyps removed were randomized to receive either berberine at 0.3 grams twice daily or a placebo with follow-up colonoscopies over 2 years. The berberine group showed a statistically significant reduction in adenoma recurrence compared to placebo, with 36% recurrence in the berberine group versus 47% in the placebo group. That translates to roughly a 23% relative risk reduction from a plant compound with minimal side effects. The most common adverse event was mild constipation. No serious adverse events were reported. And then there's the meta-analysis data. A systematic review published in Frontiers pulled data from multiple randomized controlled trials and found that berberine consistently produced statistically significant improvements across virtually every major metabolic marker: fasting blood glucose, post-meal blood glucose, HbA1c, fasting insulin, HOMA-IR, total cholesterol, triglycerides, and LDL. That kind of consistency across multiple independent research groups and study populations is what separates a legitimate therapeutic effect from a statistical anomaly. Now here's the part of this discussion that might be the most important, and it's the detail that trips up the majority of people who try berberine and then say, "It didn't work for me." Standard berberine has a significant bioavailability problem. Bioavailability refers to how much of a compound your body can actually absorb and use. For standard berberine hydrochloride, the form found in most supplements, the absorption rate is extremely low. Some estimates put it well under 5%. The molecule has difficulty crossing the intestinal barrier efficiently, and much of it is broken down or excreted before it reaches meaningful concentrations in target tissues. So when the clinical trials demonstrate berberine producing impressive therapeutic effects, they're talking about enough active compound actually reaching the cells where it needs to work. If you're absorbing only a tiny fraction of what's on the label, you may never hit that therapeutic threshold. This is where dihydroberberine, sometimes called DHB, becomes relevant. Dihydroberberine is a reduced form of berberine. Preliminary pharmacokinetic research, including a crossover study published in the journal Nutrients, found that dihydroberberine at a 100 mg dose produced significantly higher plasma berberine concentrations than a 500 mg dose of standard berberine. The dihydroberberine is absorbed more efficiently through the gut, then converts back into active berberine inside the body, where it can activate AMPK and exert its metabolic effects. This is likely why so many people have tried berberine and felt nothing. They had the right molecule, but the wrong form. They were absorbing so little of the active compound that they never reached the concentrations shown to be effective in clinical research. If you're considering trying berberine, here are some practical guidelines based on the research. First, look for dihydroberberine, specifically listed on the supplement facts label, not just generic berberine or berberine hydrochloride. Second, look for third-party testing. A certificate of analysis from an independent lab like NSF, USP, or Informed Sport helps confirm the product actually contains what it claims and is free from contaminants. Third, follow dosing that aligns with the research. For dihydroberberine, that typically means 100 to 200 milligrams taken 2 to 3 times daily with meals. Fourth, check the packaging. Berberine is light sensitive, so opaque or amber-colored containers help preserve potency. A clear plastic bottle sitting under store lighting may already be degraded before you open it. And here's a reasonable timeline for what to watch for. Within the first week or two, if you're tracking fasting blood glucose with a home glucometer, you may begin to see improvements. Energy crashes after meals may become less severe. By around the 3-week mark, you might notice changes in sugar cravings, hunger patterns, and overall energy levels. If you're seeing no changes whatsoever after 2 to 3 weeks of consistent use with meals, the product may not be delivering adequate bioactive compound to your tissues. But I need to address one more critical point, because skipping this will undermine everything. Berberine is not a magic eraser for a poor diet. If you begin a Berberine protocol but continue eating a highly inflammatory diet, heavy in ultra-processed foods, refined seed oils, and processed carbohydrates, you are generating inflammatory signals faster than any compound can suppress them. You're driving TNF-alpha and IL-6 production faster than Berberine can dampen the NLRP3 inflammasome. Think of it like running a powerful dehumidifier in a room where the pipes are actively leaking. The machine can help, but it can't outpace the source of the problem. The most effective approach combines Berberine or Dihydroberberine with meaningful dietary changes, reducing ultra-processed foods and refined inflammatory oils, and emphasizing whole foods rich in polyphenols and anti-inflammatory compounds. Things like extra virgin olive oil, dark berries, cruciferous vegetables, and other foods that support a healthy gut microbiome and protect mitochondrial function. That combination, addressing the compound, the diet, and the inflammatory environment together, is what the strongest research outcomes reflect, not a supplement in isolation. Let me close with this. You may have spent years being told that insulin resistance is simply a consequence of eating too much and moving too little. And while diet and exercise absolutely matter, the deeper truth is that insulin resistance is fundamentally an inflammatory condition, one that progressively damages your body's insulin-producing cells while simultaneously impairing the repair systems designed to replace them. Your body has the biological machinery to recover. It has progenitor cells whose job is to support cellular renewal. It has the AMPK pathway ready to restore metabolic function when it receives the right signals. What it needs is the removal of inflammatory interference and the molecular signals that reactivate those dormant repair pathways. Berberine, when used correctly and in a bioavailable form alongside a supportive dietary framework, is one of the most well-researched natural compounds for sending exactly those signals. If this changed the way you think about insulin resistance, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with the person who's been told their blood sugar is a little elevated and to just cut back on sweets because they deserve to know there's more to the story. Hit subscribe if you want more content like this. I'll see you in the next one. Disclaimer. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before starting any new supplement, especially if you are taking prescription medication or managing a chronic condition. Individual results may vary.